welcome to Navigating the Four podcast, where we discuss all things faith, healing, leadership, and communication. Exploring the topic of communication, I'm Matt Barker, and I'm joined by the other hosts of the podcast. Tackling the topic of faith, we have Freed Hardeman, Professor of Bible, Matt Cook.
Hey, guys.
Exploring the perspective of leadership, we have Assistant Dean of Emerging and Innovative Programs at Freed Hardeman, Mr. Jared Gott.
Hello.
And giving us the perspective of all things mental health, we have Director of the University Counseling Center at Freed Hardeman, Mr. Nathan Judd.
Here I am.
All right, thanks for joining us for this episode of Navigating the Four, where we bring you real talk, fresh perspectives, and a few laughs along the way. Whether you're in the middle of figuring out life or just here for some good conversation, you're in the right place. So grab a seat, maybe a cup of coffee, and let's start navigating the four together. All right, welcome to Season 3, Episode 3, where we're going to discuss leadership under pressure, and Nathan Judd is going to take this episode.
Yeah, I wish everybody could be here for the pre-show warm-up and the conversation that happens. Like, that should be its own podcast. We need a second podcast where we're like talking about all the things.
You can see us do our stretches.
Yoga.
Little yoga.
Yeah. I always wear my leggings, which doesn't come through well on the podcast. But anyway, we have a lot of dialogue and banter.
I think it's fair to mention what you've brought today.
What does that mean? Oh, my lunch?
Yeah. So just kind of what we have to deal with as we sit here and make this.
Set the environment for us.
No. I think we should set the environment of what Nathan has brought. He has brought a can of sardines.
I have.
Yeah.
Louisiana hot sauce.
Yeah. And so we get to sit here and record this podcast and smell
Wait.
his
Keep it accurate.
can of sardines.
Keep it accurate.
Everything so far has been accurate.
No. If you're going to tell the truth, tell the truth.
They are unopened.
They are unopened.
That's the truth. And I don't plan on opening them in this room.
Okay.
Fish
That's good to
steaks.
hear.
Well,
Fish steaks is what
okay. Now you tell the truth. Like, let's not pretend that you've never opened a can of
I
sardines.
have done
in
that
this
before.
room. Okay.
That is true. That is true. We're going to just stay with the truth, though. This can is unopened. Just
But I
say
think
you have to sit
I
here
still
and
smell it even though it's not open.
No way.
No.
Yeah, it's coming through.
No way. No, not even close. Do these even have an expiration date? I don't know
Next
when I
question
bought
is,
them.
what
No,
am I
those
smelling
fish are
then?
good forever.
What am I
October
smelling then?
2027.
Yeah.
But he also, on a very, very positive note, you've also brought Nala.
That is true,
The
too.
therapy dog.
Oh, man.
Makes up for it.
So
Hey,
that's pretty
Nala,
awesome.
Can you keep it down?
Nala is so chill.
She just looks up like, what are you talking about? All right. So I wanted us to think about the importance of pressure in building character, going through adversity, going through hard things, because we all like to stay in our comfort zone, but that's just not reality. And so as we're thinking about you all being in positions of leadership, so there's some blending over here with Jared's area too, but if you're comfortable sharing, what is the most difficult season of leadership you've ever faced? And I don't need to get into specifics just for like confidentiality, but those who are in the loop on campus probably remember there was a really, really, really big event that happened on campus, I think 2 years ago, and the mental health of the campus was just really struggling at that time. Lots of people coming in to our counseling office, a lot of people involved and closely connected. It affected a lot of people on campus. Everybody knew what was going on. And here I am in the UCC. I hadn't been in the role very long, and like these huge mental health demands were sitting in front of me and trying to navigate how to move forward, how to take care of myself, how to take care of the students, how to take care of my staff. That was a rough season. That was hard. Like, I had legitimate trauma responses going on, like nightmares and things. And so that was a tough season, trying to stay in the leadership area and manage that. That was rough.
I think of a project that I was asked to undertake about 5-6 years ago. And it was a project that had university implications. It involved multiple people who had been working on it before it was handed off to me to lead. All this different levels of buy-in and work had already been done. And then it was handed off for further development and to execute, right? And it was hey, this is supposed to go over 5 years, right? We're going to do this project. And really excited about it. Felt like I had gotten buy-in, that people believed in the changes I had made, and it was going really well. And like 2 months in, having the realization of, oh, I'm watching this thing fall out of the sky, right? And trying to figure out, okay, the timeline hadn't adjusted. This still has to last for 5 years. How do we salvage this?
Man.
Right? How do we salvage this in a way where people still have some belief and trust in it, and it doesn't just drag along for the next half a decade. And it really was, I would say, almost self-inflicted stress, right? Like there wasn't anyone putting pressure on me, but it was the knowledge of this will have impacts beyond me, right? And so I feel like I have to sort of step up in this moment and find a way to save this.
Yeah, so for me, probably, and I don't want to go in too much detail, like COVID was pretty challenging. As a minister who is in a sense a leader, but also, like you just mentioned, I have shepherds, church elders above me who were making the calls, and there was you couldn't make a right call as a church leader during COVID. You were isolating somebody, whichever direction that you leaned in that. But then also as a dad with a daughter who's immunocompromised, trying to make the right decisions and then leading a church in light of family stuff. Yeah, that was tricky.
You saying that, the definition of trauma that I hold on to the most is when we have to go through something that overwhelms our ability to cope with it. And like, we look back at COVID with such clear eyes and like, oh, we should have done this different. But in the moment, man, like it was rough. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I was thinking about mine in a lot of, and I don't really consider, I think you all have more areas that you can clearly define a leadership role in certain areas. Surely there's things that I'm, kind of in charge of, and I have certain leadership roles in that. I tend to be more of a support role in a lot of the different situations I'm in. So I don't really have any specifics that come to mind. I think a lot of times though, anytime I'm in a position where I'm in a leadership type role, whatever setting I'm in, I don't trust other people around me. So I tend to want to say, well, I'll just take care of this, not really include anybody else in it. So whether that's me working at the radio station, me work at church, instead of saying, hey, could you help me with this? I'm going to try to do it all myself. And then you have that pressure that maybe sometimes is unneeded, because if you would just allow others to help you, you wouldn't have as much pressure because they'll help carry that load a little bit. So I think in the leadership roles that I've had, the thing that I struggle with and that I have to consciously keep myself in check on is not trying to do everything, because people that have personality where they want things to be a certain way, they don't always trust that others are going to do things in the way that they want it. So they just do it themselves. And then you leads to burnout, all the different things that you hear about in leadership. So I think having that trust for other people, surrounding yourself with people in leadership roles that can help you is very important. But that's one of the things why there's probably a lot of times so much pressure.
Yeah. I remember when I was teaching here, I taught one class for about 10 years. And I remember I was going through kind of a difficult season, and I emailed a student something, and she responded, and she had one of those automated replies, and it was a Bible verse, and it was from Romans chapter 5, and it just hit home. It's just an auto reply for her, and it's just one that I've latched onto. But it's rejoice when you encounter suffering, because suffering produces endurance, character, and character the confident hope of salvation. And I was like, that hit me so hard. She didn't even realize she had done something, but I just realized when we go through difficult things, it's not a bad thing. It's an opportunity for growth. When I work with clients, sometimes I'll lay it out in the office, 3 different zones. There's a comfort zone, and then there's a stretch zone, and then there's a panic zone. And we like to stay in that comfort zone, but no growth happens in the comfort zone. So if we can stretch and be uncomfortable, that's where we're going to have growth. And that's kind of the sweet spot to hang out, not just as a leader, but in life. That's where we're going to have growth. But I think a lot of people try to stretch even further, and they end up in that panic zone. And when we get in panic, the mental health term for that would be dysregulation. We want to run back to that comfort zone, and that's not growth either. We run from the panic back to comfort zone, panic back to comfort zone. And so I just encourage everybody to try to stay in that stretch area. But also, things happen in life that we can't control. Like that situation that came out of nowhere that I had to deal with. I mean, I was dysregulated. I was not in my stretch zone, and it's important to do self-care and things like that when that comes up. But one thing I will say is, the more we stay in the stretch zone, the more we're able to tolerate distress, and then we can grow the stretch zone where something may have used to be in our panic zone, and now it's actually just in our stretch zone. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think in most cases, part of being a leader is setting a standard or a goal for others to follow.
Yeah.
Right. And typically, like at least leaders that I've dealt with before that I've been under, like if the goal is not set in a stretch zone, it's kind of, okay, well, what's your point? Right. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if your goal is to be the same or less as we are now, great leadership, I guess. Like, I don't think of it in that way in that moment, but that's certainly the kind of resentment that builds.
Yeah.
Right. Like, take me somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. Take us somewhere. If that's your role. So I'm thinking of like setting goals for my team in the same way. I don't want it to be just in the comfort zone. I want us to do something
Yep.
great and meaningful. I'm looking at this book in front of me. I want us to do something significant.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that people find meaning and value in that. But at the same time, you have to be careful in the goals that you set, right? In just sort of putting a goal out before people that's unattainable,
Yeah.
that you know is unattainable. You're going to cause them to spiral, to burn out, to feel
Yeah.
an unnecessary amount of pressure that's only going to cause harm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the burden of leadership.
It is
that you must stretch yourself, you must stretch other people, and in that process comes the potential for failure and the potential for criticism. And that neither one of those things are fun, but that's part of what leadership does. And I think it's why it's fair. You know, church leadership may be a little bit different, but in worlds where leaders get paid more, that's why they get paid more.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's why, I lead a camp on campus, and the reason I don't feel guilty for getting paid for leading that camp is not because of what I normally have to do. Normally, it's pretty chill. We lead it, we plan it, but I don't feel guilty getting paid for the moments when the stuff happens.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like, that's why I deserve to be paid to do this thing, because this is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got thoughts coming up about just what my job looks like and everything. And I think if people were to look at the perks of my job, they're like, man, he's got it pretty sweet. It's like, yeah, you weren't there when I was at the dorm at 2 a.m. before the semester even started.
Until it's great. Leadership's awesome
Yeah.
until a major problem occurs.
Yeah.
And that's when you earn your money. That's when you earn your pay right there.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
And I think that's true for, I could look across the board at people in leadership positions and think, yeah, that's why they are in that position, because they get to handle it. The unfortunate one are the volunteer leadership positions, like many church leaders who have to take all of this junk and they're doing it for the Lord.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm thinking about how we show up in times of stress, times of distress. What are some common unhealthy coping strategies, for instance? And I think we could name the obvious ones like drinking, smoking, all that stuff. But where I'm going is, there's a saying, we repeat what we don't repair, or if it's hysterical, it's historical. I've probably said some of those things in here, but when we're younger, we encounter difficult situations, and I don't want to get too brainy in this, but we get pulled into what's called our limbic system, which is like the kind of reptilian primal part of the brain, and it reverts to patterns. And so it's all about safety, security, connection. And so when we're younger and we experience things, what did I do to have to stay safe? Was I able to fight or run away, fight or flight? Or did I have to freeze? That was the safest response. And then in the freeze one, there's even one they call fawn, which is like going along to getting along. That's a type of freeze response. And we learn these a lot of times in our family of origin, in our church culture, just different contexts we've been in. But my point is, our brain gets wired to view things this way. And when we get put in a stressful situation, if our window of tolerance hasn't been built to a point that we're ready to handle that situation, window of tolerance, again, we got comfort, stretch, and panic. So if it pushes me outside of my window of tolerance, then I'm getting pulled into my limbic system. There's a part of the brain called the amygdala, and when it says danger, when it says this reminds me of this thing in the past, then it pulls us into our limbic system. And so what happens when we get pulled into our limbic system, we revert to patterns, because that's the quickest way to get to safety. And I think we as leaders need to have an understanding of what our patterns have been that have developed over time. And
Yeah, when I was thinking about the common unhealthy coping strategies, I think at least for me and maybe for a lot of people, that tends to be a common thing that happens, is you just shut down. Like, so I guess it would be like running away from it. So if something difficult comes your way, you tend to just like, okay, let's get back to where it's comfortable. What am I good at? Let me go back to that, if at all possible. So I would think like kind of turning away from whatever the struggle is the first inclination for a lot of people. And like you said, I think that's learned at an early age. Like, let's just say you have, growing up, something was difficult and you're like, hey, mom, dad, I don't like doing this. And they're like, okay, you don't have to do that anymore. You learn that, hey, if I don't like something, I can just not do it. And then I feel good about it. Right. And not that that's always a bad thing. There's situations that maybe it's better not to do. But from an early age, you might learn, well, if I'm uncomfortable or there's a lot of pressure here, then I don't have to do that. That could be with sports. That could be with extracurricular activities. That could be with church-related things. Anything that you think about that makes you uncomfortable. I don't want to get up in front of a group of people and speak, right? Well, if you've always been taught, well, you don't have to do that, there might be situations that you actually do have to do that, right? But if you've always been taught, and your natural way of doing things is to avoid those things that are uncomfortable, then that tends to be how you approach those things in leadership roles as well, because that's just what you're used to doing, right? So, and the same is true if you're used to freezing and not doing anything, whether it's from some trauma or whatever, that tends to be how you approach things. There's different challenges with any leadership role. Matt mentioned COVID was a big one for ministry and a lot of those things, but how do you deal with it? Maybe sometimes it means stretching and doing things that you're not comfortable with.
Jared, and if you need to jump in on your thought, but I was just going to say, like, what separates leaders who collapse under pressure from those who expand?
I think what sort of separates leaders when they're under pressure from those that handle it well to those that don't, it's a couple of things. Number one, have they taken the time before the pressure, before the crisis, whatever, to establish with those who are following them certain values, right? Is there already trust? Is there already transparency to the level that is appropriate?
Yeah.
Have they already established themselves as somebody who is not going to just hang the team out to dry, right? If so, then I think it's a very different reaction to pressure than if they are just now like, oh, you need to trust me, when they haven't cultivated that before then, and suddenly the fire takes off. I think the other thing, though, is that leaders who handle pressure well see it as an opportunity. The unhealthy coping mechanism I was going to mention was, I agree with Matt Barker. Like, a lot of times I know of situations where I have shut down, right? I can picture myself sitting at my desk just staring out the window because I just can't find motivation or anything to do anything, right? I'm done. But the other, maybe my default mechanism is, hey, we're under pressure here. I'll just do it myself.
Yes.
Right?
I can relate to that.
I don't have time to make sure it gets done right by somebody else. I'll just take on the project. I'll do it myself. We'll get it done and we'll move on past this. And then I'll be prepared for next time. Even though when next time comes, I'll just do it myself, kind of a thing. It's definitely something I've had to work on. I used to do that a lot more when I was younger and in leadership roles. Now, when a situation arises, I try to remember that, number one, it's something that's got to be handled, but two, it's something that's got to be handled by all those involved, right? It doesn't do any good for me to take it on and try to handle it entirely on my own, because the other person then doesn't have the opportunity to learn anything from that as well. And it establishes an expectation of, anytime this happens, I'll do that, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So reframing pressure and trying to see it as an opportunity to build trust and collaborative sort of engagement with your team or with those involved can go a long way. Bad leadership, I think, in a lot of situations, not all, you can't just sort of blanket these things, but it is a bad approach to leadership to just turn around and dump the pressure onto those underneath you without taking ownership of your parts of that pressure, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so I think turning around, though, to those who are following you or those who you're leading and saying, hey, here is a challenge. We're going to get through this challenge, but I need you to do your part while I do my part, and I'm not going to leave you out to dry, really builds a good team dynamic. Like, that's what you would want each day in a optimal team setting.
Yeah.
Here's a stretch goal. It's going to be tough. We're going to get through it together. It's just that there's that added pressure that can make you throw all that away and react negatively.
Matt Cook, what do you think? How does faith play a role in the idea of suffering and leadership?
I think natural reactions to challenging situations can sometimes lend themselves to the works of the flesh instead of the fruit of the Spirit. And so
Deep.
I am tempted in these sorts of moments to be easily frustrated, to not be patient, you mentioned lack of self-control, even to the point of addictive practices. At the least, and I was going to mention this a minute ago, my natural reaction to these sorts of situations is
mechanism.
to think negatively, to make negative assumptions about those who disagree with me. That's easy for me to do. And so I think the opposite of that is to say, okay, I'm going into this situation as a leader who also represents Jesus. How can I demonstrate the fruit of the Spirit in this situation? How can I be kind and loving and patient and gentle and self-controlled, even though everything inside of me is kind of ready to blow up, or I'm really kind of anxious about this? And so I think the more I can train myself to respond to these situations in those ways and allow God to develop those traits in me and demonstrate those traits in me through the Spirit, I think that develops in me then that patience that you were talking, or that endurance that you were talking about earlier. The more I can train myself to respond in Christ-like ways, the better I'm going to be at responding in Christ-like ways the next time next time.
That's right.
And all of a sudden I find myself in a situation where I can endure and persevere and be a mature Christian, James chapter 1, even through those challenges.
Yeah, that's good. Matt Barker, what do you think? How does communication change during times of stress?
Well, it's not always great. Usually it's a lot better when things are easy to communicate with whoever it is you're leading. And challenges, crises, all those different things definitely throw a wrench in a lot of times times when it's easy. I think a lot of times with leadership, as far as communication, sometimes, like we talked about, we shut down. Sometimes it could cause us to run away from whatever the problem it is that we should be addressing. Sometimes that means we're not being honest, like Jared talked about with our employees. We're just kind of ignoring it and hoping it'll go away. And we're not really informing those that we're supposed to be leading. And then they feel like they don't trust the leader as a result of that, right? So part of the issue, we tend to panic. We tend to ignore things. We tend to not be honest with those that are supposed to be kind of in our charge, right? And so that leads to a lack of trust, that the leader doesn't have the best interest in mind of those that they're leading. So I think from a communication standpoint, if at all possible, you can't always have full transparency in all situations, right? There's certain things that the leaders have knowledge of that they just can't share with their employees. But if at all possible, to inform those that are in your charge of what's going on, honesty is always better than trying to keep things from people that are in certain positions. And we can all probably think of examples where we've had someone that did not tell us something and how we didn't feel like we could trust that person as a result of it. And that just leads to negativity from that point forward, right? I don't like someone that I can't feel like I can trust. And then anytime something happens in the future, you feel like, well, how do I know they're telling me the truth this time? Because they didn't tell me the truth last time, or they didn't tell me anything at all. So I think, transparency, if at all possible, in certain situations when it can be handled that way, is important. And always trying to be honest and having that honest, open communication is very important.
I love that. I was thinking about, there's a common saying, hurt people, but healed people heal people. And I think as a leader, there are times of high stress. There are even times of crisis where we are like beyond our stretch zone that we have to navigate as leaders. But I think it's so important in a position of leadership to create as much an environment of safety in relationships with our teams. So we all know, like, we're in this together. It's okay to make mistakes. We're all going to do the best we can, instead of bringing our own poor, bad habits or patterns into those situations. So I want to close with this. Comfort doesn't produce leaders. Pressure reveals them. But growth isn't automatic. It's intentional. So I'll turn it back over to Matt Barker.
All right. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Navigating the Four. We hope today's conversation sparks something real in your faith, your healing, your leadership, or your communication. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep showing up, keep growing, and keep navigating the four. We'll see you next time on Navigating the Four podcast.